Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to kind of start here with, I guess, the challenge around buildings. Many of you will have heard some of the themes from today or might know beforehand about some of the challenges within buildings, but ultimately on our strive towards net zero and sustainability, we recognize that buildings is a key pillar to that. It accounts for around 30 to 40% of overall carbon emissions globally. And then within the actual construction phase itself, we reckon it accounts for about a third of the overall carbon emissions. So actually within that construction phase, even before you get into the OpEx phase, there's a huge opportunity for us to build smarter, build greener, and build more towards a net zero here. If we also recognize in the last few years, we're kind of advancing on two levels here. So around the net zero and how we're tackling some of the net zero challenge, there's a lot going on with respect to electrification and how we're meeting the demands around that, but also digitization. And this is where I want to talk today a little bit around the opportunity ahead of us with respect to digitization. I think we've all felt it personally in our home lives and also in our working lives in the last 2-3 years, just the acceleration that's moved towards digital, moved towards connecting different systems and working in collaboration on these different systems. And actually, that's where we need to take construction going forward in my belief. So we're used to building great buildings, but ultimately, when we start to speak to end users, there's pains, there's challenges that come with that. We talk about disparate systems that have been designed in one way, and then ultimately through the life cycle of the design and construction and then the handover and how a building has evolved, there's challenges around actually that design criteria being fit for how the end user and the occupant experiences it. And then we see changes and adjustments through that. And on top of digital and ultimately connecting in a smarter way, we actually talk about more of an integrated design approach as well. So this is that collaboration early days with respect to the design phase partnership, but also taking that all the way through the construction phase and not treating it as a kind of supply chain, but ultimately having technology players, key players around the table with the end user to develop that through the construction cycle. And I've seen some themes in some of the previous presentations and some of the discussions here today. We talk about buildings across that life cycle. So ultimately harnessing everything through the design phase into the OpEx phase. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the digital twinning, but here we're saying digital twinning actually starts in the design phase and can take you all the way through the operational phase, and it doesn't have to be different systems. It doesn't have to be a handover here. Actually, there's a working practice to connect up the data points, to use the digital twinning in your design element, and then actually take that through into the construction phase then, and into your operational phase, where ultimately you'll use that same system, the same portfolio to look at how your building is operating, look at how your portfolio of energy is operating or your building performance, and be able to manipulate and create simulations in how that building would behave under certain tolerances. So I'm just going to quickly pause here for a video which is around one of our headquarters down in the south of France. This was amalgamation of several different buildings where we started with the design approach here and then moved through the whole kind of OpEx here, looking at how we could create a net zero building and actually achieved a net positive building out the back of it.
There are already office buildings that have achieved net zero carbon emissions. The Intensity building from Schneider Electric is the future of net zero office buildings. As a global leader in digital energy solutions and management, Schneider Electric is driving toward an all-electric, all-digital world.
Intensity building, it's not only our building, it's also the way that we want to demonstrate to the market how we can manage, impact the climate change through new technology, new renewable energy, providing a new best-in-class smart building.
In Intensity, we are extremely ambitious in terms of energy consumption. We are targeting 37 kilowatt-hours per square meters. This is absolutely unique worldwide.
Nothing is burned in this building. All energy is provided by renewable energy. We consume only what we need. So we have the capability to stock energy to consume and produce only the energy that we need. And we can also deliver energy outside the building to the other. You are able to manage, in one hand, the tenant experience, the user experience, and on the other hand, the energy needs to deliver the services.
The investment to have that quality of energy consumption is really a small part of the total investment. So it's really affordable and the technology is here.
Sustainability must be part of the vision and the strategy of the company. And in Schneider Electric, sustainability is part of our DNA.
So what does this ultimately mean? So we've got here today Schneider Electric with our ETAP partners. ETAP is an acquisition from Schneider Electric in the last couple of years, as well as many other digital twinning enablers out there in the marketplace, including RIB, who heavily play in the construction phase. And ultimately, digital twinning is taking that design approach that might well have been on paper or in Excel or whatever tools we've kind of used there, and pushing them through a series of algorithms and systems and software that says, this is exactly the outcome of all of them data points. So I can now start to size my electrical system, put all my loadings in, and actually through the design tool, it's going to show me exactly how my system is going to behave. And I can throw a bunch of different simulations at it, start to shut down parts of that building, start to shut down parts of that system, and it will tell me exactly how it's going to behave. Not a, maybe it'll behave like this within a 95% degree, almost to 100% here. So it's got to be better than a kind of human intervention. So where can that take us? So if you think about then this within the construction phase and ultimately putting all of them design parameters in, including materials, costs, ways to design, the labor, the programming associated with that, and we run a construction phase and a design phase through that process, we ultimately create efficiencies in the time to construct. We also create efficiencies within the amount of materials we're using. We see huge amounts of wastage within the construction sector, and also then as we're running a building with respect to the materials being used and how much wastage goes in there. If we push them through these models, ultimately this will tell us the optimum usage and the optimum requirements required. And we've been working with developers across the UK and Ireland, but also across the world on some of these themes. If we take the example of ETAP, and they're shown in different parts of this model here, an electrical system is ultimately designed within the ETAP operating system. You get your single line diagram from an electrical point of view. You get all your different loadings, whether that is renewables coming in, whether that is off the network and the grid. And that is in the design piece. And then as you push that in through the construction phase, that becomes your commissioning tool. This becomes your checklist to actually take the data from all the metering, all the components off site, and actually validate how that system is performing. And then once handover takes place, you push this to the client. And the client ultimately takes over this system, this digital twin, and they're able to see where there are issues and problems that might not be visible. And that's what this is all about, is ultimately making the bits of your system, your design that are invisible today, visible, and being able to get the insights of how you can improve it. So here are some stats with respect to what we see as some of the inefficiencies today, but ultimately we see inefficiencies in the wastage of how we go to design. We look at program, we look at health and safety on site, and if we can improve the program and time to site, if we can improve the number of deliveries all working in conjunction and collaboration with each other, the number of trades and where they're working at different times within the program. And I think in the last couple of years with respect to how supply chain has really challenged our industry and how it's actually thrown programs out of the window time and time again, tools like this ultimately give you a live insight and view in terms of how you could run that. And then into the operate and maintain stage. So we recognize that this is around 60 to 70% of the energy and the efficiency that can be recognized within a building environment. These tools, some of them exist. We're talking here control systems, we're talking here metering systems, we're talking here people management systems, and it's actually about pulling them data streams together in an environment such as a digital twin to be able to see how it would behave if you were to make changes and adjustments and recognize the value of that. So there's 4 pillars to ultimately how we would look to decarbonize towards a net zero strategy. We look at electrification, and I think this is pretty clear in terms of how we're moving with respect to renewables, how we're moving with respect to electric vehicles, which is one of the biggest mass migrations in terms of energy that we've ever seen. But within this, in a building environment, we're now creating a much more complex system. There's an ecosystem here that we're not just taking energy off the grid. We could be potentially actually creating energy on our site, also taking energy off the grid, and we need to manage this within the context of a building. And systems and tools like digital twins and ETAP will help us to do that. Then there's an efficiency story of where we see wastage. And this comes in then the heavy play of digitization, which is a key pillar of how we're going to tackle sustainability. And then ultimately, where we see inefficiencies in the way that we're producing energy today, inefficiencies in the way that we're operating a building, we're looking here to replace. And this could be everything from gas heating to looking at heat pumps. And then how do we run that and manage that? And then finally, there's been a few topics here today as well about ultimately how do we collaborate? So how do we collaborate as an industry? How do we collaborate with the end user at the heart of it? And this is about how we go to market with respect to an integrated project management design approach and really work that from the beginning of the design process all the way through and not look at opportunities ultimately here around value engineering, which ultimately don't deliver value in the overall life cycle of a project. And we can see here down the right-hand side, hopefully you can see that, but ultimately where are we affecting this when it comes to overall sustainability and ESG scoring? So we're talking here at the top end around scope 1s and 2s. And in that engagement, and if we engage in the right way down the supply chain, ultimately reducing wastage, ultimately looking at things like circular economy as well, then this is where we can affect on the scope 3 emissions as well, which is a big challenge going forward. So at Schneider Electric, we have products and systems which are badged as green premium. This will help us to identify which products, which solutions will ultimately help from a scope 3 emissions point of view, which will also impact on scope 1 and 2. And this is everything from things which drive energy performance, help us towards that net zero picture, but also have the well-being performance as well. So without the hazardous wastes and materials within the products are there as well. And that's everything. So just on the slide here is a QR code for our upcoming Innovation Summit, where we'll be talking about everything from the design practice through to the end user process, and it will be engaging with the full group of Schneider Electric offers, and that's coming up in the next few weeks. Thank you.